We are going to stuff these beautiful artichokes. Now, artichokes are actually a flower. They grow about as tall as me, almost right here, and they open up into this huge flower. And on the inside, it is a deep, dark purple, and on the outside is this beautiful green color. So the flowers themselves are really pretty, but a lot of the artichokes, of course, get picked before they ever get a chance to flower because we want to eat them. They're delicious. And we're going to stuff them with our own stuffing and some great cheese. So the first thing we have to do is get them ready. And they're a little bit difficult to get ready, but I'm going to walk you through it. It'll be easy. So the outer leaves that have split or have turned colors, you want to pull a few of those off. And they're really easy. Just grab them and pull. We're just taking off the outer layer. You don't want to take off too many because all those leaves is where we're going to stuff all the delicious stuffing. So we want to have lots of room for that. Now, once you get that outer layer off, just like that, you want to take and cut the stem, and we want to cut it right at the base of the artichoke. Right there. Now save the stem because it's going to come into play in just a little while. It's a very important part of our dish. You want to make sure that the artichoke is going to sit up really well when you put it in your dish to bake it or to steam it. And then we've got to look at all the leaves. Now on each one of these leaves, there's a little spike on the end, and you don't want to eat that. You want to make sure that we cut those off. So the best way to do that is with kitchen shears. And what we want to do is cut just the tips of the leaves, just like that. You can actually see right at the very end where it gets kind of rough, and that's what we want to cut off. So we're cutting all the leaves to where they will have this straight edge. And it's easiest to do with the kitchen shears. Once you get a couple of these cut right around the base here, you want to go back and cut the top. So the top part you're going to cut with a knife because it's just easier than trying to cut them each individually. So we're going to take our knife, make sure your knife is really sharp, and we're going to cut the top part off about an inch down. Now it's going to be different for each artichoke. You just have to kind of look at it and see, but it's going to be where the leaves start to curve over. That's the part you want to cut off. So we're going to cut through that. It's a little bit difficult to cut as long as your knife is sharp. And that opens up into all these beautiful layers of the artichoke. And that's what we're going to stuff. But hidden deep inside that artichoke, all the way in the center, is something else that's spiky and fuzzy. And we don't want to eat that either. So you have to use your fingers and pull apart the artichoke. And it helps when you're picking your artichokes in the store. If you feel them, you want them to be a little soft. Now, not mushy, but you want them to be a little soft because if they're soft, they're easy to pull apart like this. If they're hard, you're never going to get them apart to get all that stuffing in there. So once you get down to the little leaves in the center, you can pull some of those out. And you're going to get to the very center of the artichoke, where you're going to see the fuzzy part, which would be the center of the flower. If you just think about a flower when it opens and it has the little center part, that's what's in the center of the artichoke. And it almost looks like hair, but it's the little fuzzy part of the center of a flower because it's a flower. So the best way to get this out is with a spoon. You want to scrape all of that out of the center and pull that out. It almost looks a little like corn husk also. So it's really fine, thin threads, and they're just not really nice to eat. They're edible, but it's not really what you want to eat. So we're going to scrape that off, but directly underneath the fuzzy part is the actual heart of the artichoke. Now that is what you want to eat. That's the best part. So don't scrape too hard. Just get the top part off. Once you don't see any more of those little silks or the little hairs, then you're done scraping that. And it should look something like that. It's going to have most of the hair gone out of there and down to this little tender center part that is the actual heart. And that's where it's a really tender bite of food. But the leaves themselves, although you don't eat the whole leaf, you're going to scrape the leaf and get all the filling and everything that we put in there. So we want to leave all of those intact as well. So that's how we clean our artichoke, but artichokes, like a lot of things, will start to oxidize once they hit the oxygen. So this is what we've got to do next. We've got to get a bowl and fill it with cold water, and you want to put lemon juice in that water as well as some lemons, because you've got to get some kind of acid to keep that from oxidizing. So we've got a bowl with some cold water, and we've got just some lemons. We're going to roll the lemon, and we're going to cut it in half. The half a lemon you want to take and squirt that juice into the bowl, and go ahead and just put the lemon in there also. That's going to get some of that lemon juice into your water. It's going to keep your artichokes from oxidizing. So you'll take the artichoke that we just cut, and you're going to put it upside down in the water just like that. You're going to do the same thing with all of your artichokes and get them ready and soaking in the water. All right, we have the stems of the artichokes that we saved earlier, and now I'm going to show you what we're going to do with them. You have to kind of clean them up a little bit because the outside is kind of rough. So you want to take your knife and you want to cut the woody stem, just the outside edge of it, because we're going to use this in the water that we put in the bottom of our artichokes to steam them. And that's going to kind of make an artichoke broth. And when we're done with the artichokes, we will want to pour that over the top of our artichokes to give them more flavor. So we're always building flavors and making sure we're using every part of the vegetable. So we've got all of our stems cleaned. And now we're going to get to chopping on all of our flavors to build our stuffing. The first thing we're going to do is our onion. We're going to use a regular yellow onion. We're going to cut the end, both ends off, and then peel the outer layer. Now the actual word artichoke means pine cone, and it makes sense because it looks just like a pine cone before it opens up into the flower. And that's when they're picked, is when they're small like that. We're cutting our onion in half, and we're going to do it the same as we always do. Cut the little strips into it, and then we're going to turn it sideways and cut it into chunks. We're going to do that for both pieces. Now there's kind of a funny story that goes along with the artichokes as well. It's one of the Greek legends, and the way that the legend goes is that Zeus went to visit his brother Poseidon. And while visiting his brother Poseidon, when he arose from the water, he noticed a beautiful woman. I'm going to put these onions off to the side, and we're going to get our bell pepper. Green bell pepper and red bell pepper, just like this. Cut them in half and pull the insides out with your hand, and then we're just going to cut those into chunks as well. So Zeus sees this beautiful woman, and Zeus wants to take her home with him. And so to take her home with him to live with the gods, he makes her into a goddess. And the goddess comes to live with Zeus. And she's happy living with Zeus, but she gets lonely and she misses her family. So she decides to go visit her family. And when she goes to visit her family and Zeus finds out, it makes him really mad. So Zeus throws her back to earth and turns her into an artichoke flower. And that is the story of the artichokes. It's kind of a neat story. Kind of makes you think about Greek mythology when you're having your artichokes. If you've never seen the artichoke flower, I recommend trying out one of your local farmers markets. A lot of the farmers grow them, and some of them will actually grow them into the whole flowers instead of picking the buds, because the bud is actually what we eat. So once it goes to flower, you can't really eat it. So the next thing we need to cut, our last thing, is our celery. We're going to split the celery right down the center, just like this. The reason we're doing that is to help us when we line up the celery now, instead of it being one big piece, it's going to be already in smaller pieces because we've already cut once. So saving yourself some time, keep the tip of the knife on the board and just rock it across. The leaves and all are edible. They all taste the same. So you want to make sure that you don't waste any part of the celery. Now I have a pan on the burner here. We're going to turn it on about a medium. And we're going to get that going hot. And we're going to add just a little bit of olive oil. Now you either saute in olive oil or butter. For this instance, we're using olive oil. So a little bit in the pan. And then all of our veggies in there. And you're going to see all of that color going into the pan. And we're going to stir that around. This needs to cook for about 2 minutes. They're going to soften up a little bit, and then we're going to start to build our stuffing for our artichokes. The reason that we're cooking these down for a couple of minutes is because we want to soften them up. And the reason we want to soften them up is because we're stuffing them into our artichokes. And it's kind of a small vessel that we're stuffing them into. So we don't want big, hard chunks of our vegetables. We want the flavor from the vegetables in our stuffing, but we want them to kind of soften and be easier to stuff in our artichokes. All right, the next thing that we do, since we've sauteed them, is start building our stuffing. And don't think of stuffing like Thanksgiving type stuffing. This is a simple, easy stuffing that you would use to fill, especially something as small as our artichoke. So what we're going to do first is add a little bit of the broth. We need to cool it down. And you'll hear that steam coming off because we had this on a hot flame, and what we need to do is cool it down because we need to stuff it in our artichokes, and we may have to use our hands to do part of that, and we don't want it that hot when we're doing it. And then you're adding an Italian breadcrumb. You can use one with Parmesan if you'd like, or you can just add your own Parmesan in, but we are going to add a little bit of that and stir it up. And we're going to add that and broth and then a little bit more breadcrumb until we make enough mixture to fill our artichokes. We've added the breadcrumbs and the broth, and we kept doing that until we got a stuffing that's a pretty thick consistency. And the last thing we're going to add is our cheese. Now you can add the cheese to your stuffing, or you can just put the cheese in the little leaves by itself. But I kind of like to add it to my stuffing, and then we're also going to add some on the top as well. So it's going to be about 1.5 cups of the cheese. It's a good bit of cheese. Mix that in there, and then we're ready to stuff our artichokes. Now the stuffing part gets a little tricky too, but I'm going to show you an easy way to get it done. All right, we mix the cheese in, and now it's time to stuff. This is the fun part. But like I said, it is a little bit tricky. So we have our artichokes in the water, and we want to make sure when we take them out of the water that we shake them off really well. We're going to pat them just a little on a wet towel just to get most of that out of the inside. And this is what we want to do next. You're going to take your filling. Every one of these little leaves, you're going to put filling in. All of that is a bite. So you're going to hold the leaf out using a little spoon, and you're going to fill it just like this. It gets kind of messy and it takes a minute, but it's going to be so worth it in the end. Just takes a little stuffing on each leaf all the way around. And then when we get to the center, we'll fill just a little bit of stuffing in the center. Now, if you wanted, you could use a different stuffing in the center, and you could add a meat into this dish, like a sausage or chicken or anything that you would like to put into the center of the artichoke. Our stuffing is just a vegetable stuffing. You can change that up any way you'd like. Now, it gets kind of messy doing this. It's not going to look really pretty. But the end result is going to be so amazing and taste so delicious. We have all of our artichokes stuffed, and we have them topped with our beautiful cheese that's going to melt down in each layer of those artichoke leaves. So the next thing that we need to do is get them in our pan. There's a few steps before you put them in the pan, so I want to show you a few tricks. You'll see in the bottom of my pan, I have aluminum foil. And you probably wonder what the aluminum foil is for. But it's to sit the artichokes on. So all we're going to do is take some aluminum foil. You're just going to ball it up into a ball and make like a little ledge for your artichokes to sit up on so they're not sitting down in the water. Because basically what we're doing is steaming the artichokes, and we want them to steam but not sit there and boil in the water. So once you get those made, you're going to take your artichokes and you're going to sit them down in your pan, using that to sit the artichokes up on top of, and it'll hold them in place. You want to have a pan that fits your artichokes but is not really a lot bigger than your artichokes, because you want them to just barely fit in there. Last guy in there, and you see they're nice and snug. As they cook down now, they're going to get a little smaller, so there'll be some room once they cook down. Now the next thing you're going to do, we have that water with the lemons that we soaked our artichokes in. We're going to put a little of that water down on the bottom of our pot, just a little bit. We have the water in there. It's about an inch thick, and then remember those artichoke stems from earlier? This is where they come into play. We're going to put them down into that water. So you just slide them down around all of the artichokes. Now what this is going to do is going to cook in that water with the lemon and the flavorings from the artichokes, and it's going to make kind of an artichoke broth, and we'll spoon a little bit of that on top of our artichokes once they're done. Now you want to cover them up. We're going to cook them on top of the range for about 25 to 30 minutes on a medium heat, and when we open them back up, they're going to be melted and perfectly cooked. Our artichokes are done, and now we're going to lift the lid and see what they look like. Ooh, they're delicious looking. That cheese has melted all over the top. The artichokes have softened up. The leaves will get really, really soft when you cook them, and you can kind of tell if you take something and you just push on the leaves slightly. You can see that they're really soft. They're starting to come apart, and that means it's ready. So now we're going to plate our artichokes, and that's our lesson for today. We learned how to stuff artichokes and how to cook them to perfection.